I would find myself in some kind of bus or other with many peoples. Seems people were not the only thing on the bus. It was full of snakes too. There were masses of them, and they squirmed and snaked around, as snakes have an inclination to do. So almost like the sequel to Snakes on a Plane, except on a bus, perhaps a budget sequel. All the people were very terrified of the snakes they seemed to be sharing their bus with. But there seemed some plan in operation that would deal with the serpentine menace. I was very much a part of the scene, and not just observing or regarding the situation from a position of safety where I could watch proceedings. But the participants in the scene could not see me, nor would I be in any peril from the elements or aspects of it. I've had real side dreams where I can be amidst natural disasters and mighty battles, but seem to be viewing from a position, maybe a vibrationary life level or dimension, where I am in no danger, and thus don't have to run from erupting volcanoes, or have laser fights with people, or have to deal with the funny creatures. In a way, this can be less of an adventure, as it's more like watching a TV, although a fully immersive version, like a virtual reality. Evidently, the more aware an individual becomes, the more they can operate in multiple life levels and positions at once, and view all this simultaneously. And when one becomes fully aware and supersedes creation, they can be everywhere at once. They is, and so by this a token of isness, they are everywhere and everything with their real awareness. Being in creation would limit this to an extent, even with awareness, as you would now have to deal with a personal vehicle that is restricted by cause and effect, and so experiences come in a sequence of, to the personal self, individual blocks or scenes of the ever unfolding and decided upon experience. Although with awareness, the real side will begin to present situations where you are seemingly operating in multiple positions, viewpoints at once, watching an event from a different life level or position of awareness. The reptilians do this very effectively with the physical from the astral, as they can move their awareness between these two life levels at will, and operate unseen from an astral level that most can't perceive from the physical, and in their daily passing dream physical lives. Anyway, so these snakes that were on the bus were not of the harmless variety either. They were venomous, but not highly so. They were like vipers, with their diamond patterns on their bodies. A bite would not be favourable and make you most unwell, but not life-threateningly so. Yet still, these snakes were instilling plenty of fear amongst the bus dwellers. There was one individual who seemed to be the leader of the bus people, and she was dictating a scheme that would deal with the pesky snakes. I wasn't a part of these peoples, but I did voice my concern as to the suggestions made, pointing out how the serpents may well leave people alone if left to their own devices. My real awareness was operating here, my personal self not knowing what was going on, but it would just have to sit back with its confusion and let things unfold. The personal self always along for the ride on the real side, and always in a bewildered state as a rule. The plan was executed according to this woman's scheme. The bus turned over on its side, spilling peoples and snakes out into the open area beyond. It was a sort of countryside scene beyond the bus, as I had predicted and attempted to warn the leader woman about. This had the snakes rather upset, and they were biting and attacking people far more than they would have with the method I had suggested, whatever that had been. But it was a method that would have been more mutually agreeable for snakes and peoples alike. I tried to get the people to be calm, to not thrash about in alarm, make the kinds of sudden and frantic, panic-stricken actions that would incite the snakes to strike. But they were all so very fearful. This was an impossibility to get across, so most were getting bitten. But finally, all the snakes and humans were out in the open, the snakes slithering around, the humans still in abject terror and nursing bite wounds. Part of this scheme would result in the deaths of the snakes, and again, this is why I was displeased with it. I was adamant there was an alternative, where snakes and humans would be safe. But with any leaders, they tend to be more listened to if everybody is in fear, and the snakes were now dying. The exact nature of the snake deaths, the nature of the plan that made it so, the details were not easy to determine, to bring through to the personal self for later reflection, but my real self knew, and it made perfect sense at the time when I was connected with my real awareness. I wasn't very amused by this outcome, and so I would depart from the scene, wandering off through the countryside, wandering quite a way, it would seem. I came to a curious portal, a glimmering vortex, a little out of place, it would seem, and stepped through it. I wasn't considering anything really at this action, just doing, as the real self is inclined to do, knowing what to do in any circumstance and situation if the personal self doesn't intercede. I found myself in a room now, in a house or other, and on the other side of the portal was a television on this side. I would turn around and examine it. Then I would see an individual on the television, as though in a movie one might watch on the TV. He was on the other side, in the open country area, with the shimmering opening, and able to see and speak with me, as I could him from my TV side. Seemed then it was a portal of a kind, open on the side he was on, but closed, and looking like a standard TV set on my end. This individual, I would impression, was a guide. He had a familiar look to him, adopting the form of a friend I knew from the physical, from years ago. But with guides who choose to adopt forms other than their own, as they generally do in my real side experiences, their telltale signatures reveal them as the guides they are. They have an undeniable sense about them, a presence, a mighty awareness, and is standing that any guise they choose cannot conceal, though awareness is required to recognize them through their guises. He was requesting that I return to the place I had been, the place he was speaking from, the other end of this conduit, but I would express doubts as to my ability to do this. The TV screen seemed very solid and unpassable, unlike the shimmering, swirling opening from his side. He would explain to me how I would do this, and the knowledge was familiar, as though I'd done this before. A refresher, then, of ability or techniques once known, but forgotten in my current lifetime and position. Again, the nature of this information I could not bring back to my personal self. It always makes sense on the real side with the real awareness and self. I would press my hands to the screen and feel about it till I hit the right spot. Then I exerted a kind of energy through my hands and pressed my fingers into the very screen. My fingers, then my hands, pushed into the television, and as I parted my hands, I began to make a hole in the very surface of the television, the screen, and as it became larger, I could see the guide and the area he was in through the hole. When the hole was of an adequate size, I would crawl through the space, and thus return to this countryside area with this guide. Back in this place again, the guide would take me around this world, or wherever it was, as though we were sweeping the entire place at tremendous speed. He wanted to impress upon me how the world here seemed to be in a demise of a kind. As a result of what had transpired with the bus earlier, it was as though the world here were bleeding away into a void. The place looked almost as though painted, as were the impressions afforded, and it was as though the paint were draining from the world and vanishing into a blackness, the world becoming progressively less. The guide would depart, not before dropping me off at the bus with the dead snakes, and the bitten people, and the leader woman. I would attempt to explain this occurrence, how she and her peoples were now in danger. No easy task. She was rather self-convinced that all was well. Ultimately, I convinced her to an extent, based on if I could prove the portal phenomena to her or not, and thus I led her to the very spot of the portal, and presented her with the evidence she sought. She accepted now my words and warning, and would return to the others to convey this information, as though they hadn't had quite the day of it already, with biting snakes and all. Vehicles tend to demonstrate the personal self, attitudes, the general consciousness of individuals manifesting as cars and such on the real side. If the individuals are inside the vehicles, they are evidently sitting with their attitudes, very much then of their personal selves, with all the created aspects that make their little self what it is. With a bus then full of peoples, and it was an extraordinarily large bus too, for it had hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals within it. What we have here is the created consciousnesses, attitudes, or part of the personal selves, the emotional vehicle most likely over the other vehicles of these individuals. The overriding attitude, astral vehicle emotional output was that of fear, and so they were very much locked into the lower aspects of their personal created selves, very much physical, astral, and so with no awareness connection, and very much out of tune with the higher aspects even of their personal selves, you might say, the intuition, imagination, even the mental faculties. They were terrified of the snakes, and understandably too. They were venomous, but not so venomous as to justify such an extent of fear. The snakes evidently were the reptilians, and these people had clearly become aware of this species, demonstrated by them being very much aware of the snakes amongst them on the bus. Maybe a future view, where the reptilians would become known to the humans in whatever form that may unfold, and the reaction was rather predictable. Panic, fear, and all that emotionally restricting taplining reaction to experience, which would be far better regarded with objectivity. I would suggest then the humans at this point had quite the wake-up, now aware far more of the reptilians and alien influences on their planet, but in a state of panic resultingly, as panic was the personal self-reaction, and with evidently little real awareness connection, peoples react according to whatever way they have set up their personal created selves. Someone here establishing themselves as the leader, hatching a scheme to deal with the snakes, the reptilians, and of course, it seemed to be along the lines of conflict, of fighting them, battling with them, kill or be killed mentalities. It would seem then the frightened masses would agree with this, and fearful as they were, would declare war on the reptilians. They would turn the bus on its side, evidently not its usual position, suggesting that such a mass reptilian-orientated experience for the humans was turning their personal self, or parts of it, the emotional self in particular, upside down, with fear of a kind never before experienced. Knowledge of an alien species would be enough to turn anyone's world upside down if they hadn't considered anything of the kind. And so they battle the reptilians in whatever way they do, and naturally the reptilians fight back. The snakes were biting, and I had tried to convey to them this wasn't the best way to go about this, that the knowledge of the presence of the reptilians serves as a wake-up, yes, but now the trick is to not get personal, self-engaged emotionally with the experience. Perhaps I was suggesting the alternative, that of connecting with the real awareness, and thus being able to deal with this reptilian revelation more objectively. For any fight or battle we become involved with will drag us into the cause and effect of creation, everything in creation representing a created idea, including fights, battles, and wars between species. Those that engage are agreeing with the idea the battle represents, and so will be sucked down into the effect, and regardless of the position assumed, be it the side of good or evil, the dualistic nature of cause and effect creation indiscriminately ensures you will be the effect of what you decide, what you agree with. And alas, then, despite what I probably did suggest along these lines, the humans proceeded to fight with the reptilians and embroil themselves in cause and effect creational consequences. In this situation, the humans were very much bitten, but did seem to deal with and kill the reptilians. Regardless of the outcome, They were locked into a karma of their choosing. Maybe they may have listened to sense, but for this leader, who certainly was fanning the flames of their fear, and was instrumental in ensuring that the people would battle the reptilians in this manner. So I suggest that when and if the reptilian presence becomes known, there may even be an arranged war, a negotiated battle. Like all wars on this planet, it may even be staged to seem as though the humans are battling the reptilian aliens. Maybe the humans do deal a significant blow and secure a victory here or there. Maybe the governments unveil technologies to match the reptilians, or maybe the whole show will be just that, theatre for the masses. For the world is run and controlled by reptilians. So if such a supposed battle occurred, it would be one arm of the reptilians against the other. Perhaps a greater degree of Orwellian control can be exacted in response and necessity to the reptilians' presence, and thus more readily accepted, more agreed to by the humans. A kind of Project Blue Beam, or Green Beam, if it's a faked or semi-orchestrated reptilian alien invasion. Either way, certain characters and leaders will manifest, I'm sure, to ensure the human programmed masses perform in accordance with what the controllers decree. For at the higher levels of control and into the higher life levels, and especially with the Callum god, he and his highly ranked and more knowledgeable minions will know that to keep their slaves, to keep their support structure, to keep their positions maintained through agreement, those agreeing to their systems of control must stay in the simulated matrix at all costs. They will also know of the principle of cause and effect, and how any agreement works to ensure continued unconsciousness in their controlled matrix, and they are more than delighted when the humans perform and react. Hence why the endless supply of happenings that keep people engaged, keep them emotionally reacting, keep them agreeing, keep them in creation. So perhaps a reptilian revelation is inevitable, even orchestrated by the very reptilians. But the controllers never let a good opportunity go to waste, or certainly won't miss the chance to jump on an opportunity or a situation out of their hands. So may as well get the masses to battle the reptilians, even if it is just theatre. It is as good a means as any to keep them in creation for future unconscious slavery positions. And in this experience, where the guide showed me how the world was bleeding away how the colour was draining from the world into a void. Well, this is the culmination again of all the agreed upon ideas of demise, restriction, constriction. It is the experience that reflects the overall lack of awareness, and in this case, the reptilian battle that could have been a wake-up, could have sparked the humans into awareness instead of personal self-reaction. They could have taken a new step beyond that which they have always considered. Their bus had been turned over. They'd stepped beyond it, beyond that which they had known. For in the experience, the snakes were venomous, but not life-threateningly so. The reptilians represent a restriction and hazard in regards to being creationally mired, but with awareness not so much. And with the connection to real awareness, one can supersede creation, all its ideas, and the reptilians, and the ideas they represent. They will still be there, and doing what they do, but with awareness we can better handle ourselves, and extricate ourselves from agreement to them, and all they create. They are not as venomous as they might like us to believe, in other words. Although it seemed I failed to get the message across initially, and became perhaps a little despondent, the guide would encourage me to try harder, showing me the consequences of the world in its demise, as a result of the agreements to its destruction, and thus I would return to the bus, and the peoples, and the leader. Seems I was able to get my point across finally to this woman, and so even if leader types are instrumental in fanning emotional reaction to the reptilians, even they are capable of seeing sense. They have a real self too, and if reached, maybe they will have a change of heart if we are persistent. Many leader types and reptilians, after the longest time of suppression and control, are coming around, are paying attention and singing the New You song. And if not, as everyone has free will to decide, if people choose to become embroiled in another battle, they will be the effects of this idea they are agreeing with, and this agreement will be layered upon all the other agreements they are locked into, and add further to the overall effect, the overall demise of the world and creation itself, as exemplified by the world draining away into a void.
Terrific as usual, Kevin. Yes, you've explained all of creation once again. Thank you.